Hello, this is Courtney with C. Clark Creative. Thanks for joining me. Today's card is a coffee blend turnabout card using the so-called stamp set from Concord and Ninth. Turnabout stamps are super fun. You can use multiple colors. I'm showing you the stamp set here. That's the stamping guide. And then there's also an alignment tool that I'll show you in just a minute. This is the turnabout jig and a card panel, some repositionable adhesive, 4 ink colors, and that's about everything we need to get started. So how I start is taking my A2 size card panel and using that repositionable adhesive, getting it onto my turnabout jig. I'm going to make sure that number 1 that is in the upper corner is where I'm going to start, but I'm going to line this card up with, there's some hash marks on this turnabout jig just to help you get that lined up correctly. And then here I'm showing you the 1, 2, 3, and 4 to keep track of the order of your turns. So always start with number 1 up. This right here is the alignment tool. I'm going to set that aside. That comes with each stamp set, and you're going to pull off your stamp, put it face down, aligned over this alignment tool, and then that X on the alignment transparency, you're going to line up with the X on your jig. It's kind of a hash mark line imprinted through the jig that you can't really see here, but it's sticking out behind that card panel. If you have a hard time lining it up, just don't put that card panel on until after you've got the stamp put onto your Misti lid. So got it adhered. I'm just rubbing that stamp a little bit just to help it take ink well. And I'm going to start with my first color. I generally start with the lighter color, moving on to darker colors. I'm using Gina K inks today. Going to start with Wild Dandelion. I stamp generally 2 to 3 times just to make sure I get a good impression before moving on to the next color. And then a quarter turn with each new color. So here we go. The second impression, I think I'm going to do one more just on that cup. I seem to be missing that cup with my small ink cube. So I'm cleaning with a Gina K tidy towel, making sure that stamp's really nice and clean. I'm also going to wipe off that jig a little bit. Sometimes I notice the color will transfer from different stamp impressions. So there we go, the quarter turn. I have that number 2 up in the corner, and I'm going to move on to my next color, which is Passionate Pink. My third color is going to be Tranquil Teal. And then my fourth color, I finish up with Wild Lilac. Just repeating the steps, inking a few times so I feel like the impression is good, cleaning the stamp really well, cleaning the jig, doing a quarter turn, and then moving on to the next color. I did ink this color a little bit better. I think I only had to do 2 repeat stamps. So that's, I just pointed out that number 3 at the top of the jig. Just as a reminder, you should be on your third color. If you've got that number 3 at the top, that'll help prevent you from inking over something you've already inked. Again, I'm cleaning off that jig just to make sure I don't transfer any of that color over on my last stamping. So I'm just kind of seeing where I can put that magnet. Again, I'm using the Misti, so if the jig is pulled up, I can always just reposition it where it needs to. This just kind of helps it stay in place. So I'm on to my Wild Lilac now. keeping this card nice and bright. So just a final clean on the jig and the stamp, and then I'm going to use an adhesive eraser to get the repositionable adhesive off the back of that card panel, but it rubs right off of the jig and right off of the Misti. And to be honest, it actually rubs right off the back of the card panel too, but I tend to use the eraser because it comes off even easier with the eraser. So I'm going to pull off that mug because I'm going to use that mug as my sentiment. It says Coffee with Friends is the perfect blend. And I thought that would be super cute if I used a coordinating cardstock and using white pigment ink to stamp. So I grabbed some Tranquil Teal cardstock, again from Gina K. It's the coordinating color to the ink that we used. And I'm going to stamp that image. It's going to take a few times. I am using a pigment ink which stays wet, so I end up letting this dry overnight. It was getting kind of late by the time I was getting to this point, so I let that panel dry overnight because you do not want to try die cutting this before that pigment ink has fully dried, just because it will smear. It has a little bit of a oily base to it, so it stays wet quite a bit longer than inks. Pigment ink stays on top of the cardstock, whereas an ink kind of soaks into cardstock. So that's why ink dries so quickly, and tend to use that for most applications. But there are times, like when you want white, that you gotta go to the pigment ink to get the effect you're wanting. Have a stamp scrubber here that I'm using just to get all that ink off. The card itself, in where it says Coffee with Friends, that is kind of an imprint on the stamp, so I want to make sure I got all that pigment ink out there, which is why I pulled out the scrubby. Cleaned up very nice, getting that placed back on to that clear coat. Got my card panel. I'm going to trim that down a little bit. Now I'm noticing I do have a little bit of a smudge where some of my pink ink transferred over from the back of the stamp, so I was just kind of aligning that, so once I trim it, my mug will cover that up. So I trim the card panel down to 5 1/8 by 3 7/8, and then I have a card panel of Wild Lilac, which is another coordinating color cardstock from Gina K, that I'm going to use as a panel behind just to frame it out a little bit. So now I've got 2 colors of coordinating cardstock just to help tie everything together with this card. So I'm going to die cut out the mug, and then right here I have a scrap piece of craft cardstock that I'm going to cut this oval from, and this oval ends up being the coffee in the coffee mug. So I just glue that on using some Gina K Connect glue. And then I'm also going to use liquid glue to get that purple card panel onto my A2 card base, which is cut from Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. So get that card panel on, and then the Turnabout panel I'm going to pop up with some Scotch foam tape just to give a little bit of dimension. And then I'm going to take double-sided adhesive foam shapes from scrapbook.com on the back of that mug, just to get that mug to pop up on top of the Turnabout panel. So I'm just getting a few strips of the Scotch foam tape onto the Turnabout panel. Just checking to make sure I had my card aligned correctly before I put that panel on there. Not that it really matters, because these panels are good no matter what direction you put them, kind of by design. So here are those adhesive foam bits from scrapbook.com. These are really great. They come in that larger size and then this little bitty size, which is just perfect for the handle. Much easier than trying to cut down pieces of Scotch foam tape, which I have done before, and it's doable. This takes a little bit more effort, and this is quite a bit more simple. So just a final little embellishment, I pull out some Avery Elle Raspberry Hemp Twine, just kind of a twisted twine. I'm feeding that in between the layers of foam shapes that are back behind there, and I just loop around the handle a couple times, then I tie a bow, and then I'm going to take just a little bit of the Connect glue to help I was playing around with some ideas here. So, nope, we're just going to do a bow. But use just a little bit of the liquid glue to help hold that bow from coming untied or moving around on this card. So just want a cute little bow. Going to trim off that excess. And with that, the card will be done. Those were not my sharp scissors, so I had to come back with my sharp scissors to cut off the frayed bits that those other scissors did. A little tack of glue to help hold in place, and there we go. So thanks for joining me. Hope you feel inspired to try Turnabout stamps yourself, and we'll see you next time.